The wolf should have come by now. Every healer in Valdemir had said the same thing. 5 years old, and Prince Stellin had shown no sign of the beast that lived in every royal bloodline for 12 generations. No golden eyes flickering in moments of emotion. No growl rumbling beneath his small chest. Nothing. The kingdom whispered what no one dared say aloud. A wolfless heir was no heir at all. King Corvin had buried his wife. He would not bury his son's future too. So he summoned every healer, every scholar, every mystic who claimed to understand the ancient bond between shifter and beast. They examined the boy. They chanted over him. They fed him potions that made him sick for days. Nothing worked. And then she arrived, an Omega so low in station she wasn't permitted to meet the king's eyes. A maid assigned to sweep floors and empty chamber pots. A woman with a past buried so deep she'd almost forgotten it herself. She wasn't supposed to speak. She wasn't supposed to notice. She certainly wasn't supposed to see what 12 royal healers had missed, but she did. And nothing in Valdemir would ever be the same. The great hall of Valdemir had once rung with laughter. That was before the queen died, before the prince failed to shift, before hope became something spoken only in whispers. Now the hall held silence and shadows, and a throne occupied by a man who looked like he hadn't slept in months. King Corvin sat rigid, his knuckles white against the armrests. Tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair silvering at the temples despite his 32 years, he had the look of a man carved from stone and grief. His pale blue eyes fixed on the healer standing before him. "Say that again," Corvin said quietly. The healer, an elderly man named Fenick who had served 3 generations of Valdemir kings, spread his hands helplessly. "Your Majesty, I have exhausted every remedy. The prince's wolf simply is not there." "Not there." Corvin's voice was flat. "My son is 5 years old. The wolf manifests by 3. You're telling me it doesn't exist?" "I cannot find it." Fennick's tone carried resignation. "Perhaps it never formed. Perhaps the trauma of his mother's death during his birth. Do not speak of her." The words cut like a blade. Fenick fell silent. Corvin descended from the throne and stopped inches from the healer. "What happens to a wolfless royal? Speak the law aloud." Fenick paled. "Sire, please." "Speak it." Barely above a whisper. "A wolfless heir cannot inherit, cannot rule, cannot remain in the line of succession. Cannot remain." Corvin laughed bitterly. "A polite way of saying my son will be cast out, stripped of his name." "The law exists to protect the kingdom," Fenick said carefully. "A ruler without a wolf cannot command the pack bond. Get out." Fenick retreated, his footsteps echoing in the emptiness. Corvin stood alone, hands clenched. He thought of Lyrian, his late queen, her face peaceful in death even as their son screamed his first breath. She had made him promise one thing: protect him. Whatever happens, protect our son. He was failing her. Below the great hall, in servants' quarters that never saw sunlight, a young woman scrubbed floors that would only be dirty again by nightfall. Her name was Ioni, and she had learned long ago that being invisible was the only way to survive. She worked in silence, hands raw from lye soap. The other servants ignored her, an Omega with no family, no pack, and no history worth mentioning. She was barely worth noticing. That was exactly how Ioni wanted it. She had almost finished when a door burst open and healer Fenick swept past, muttering. He didn't see her. No one ever did. But Ioni heard him clearly. Impossible child. Nothing there. Nothing at all. Unless... He stopped abruptly, shook his head. No. Foolish thought. Ioni's hand stilled. Unless what? She told herself to forget it. The prince's condition was none of her concern. She almost succeeded. 3 days later, Ioni was reassigned. The head housekeeper delivered the news without ceremony. "The nursemaid quit. Couldn't handle the prince's fits. You'll take her place," Ioni's stomach dropped. The prince's quarters? Report before dawn. Keep the rooms clean, bring his meals, and stay out of his way. And don't upset him. Ioni climbed the winding stairs to the prince's tower as the sun rose, her arms laden with fresh linens. The tower was separate from the main castle, connected by a single covered bridge that groaned beneath her feet. Isolated. Whether to protect the prince or hide him, she wasn't sure. The air grew colder as she climbed, stale, as if no one had opened a window in months. She pushed inside. The room was large but dim, heavy curtains drawn tight against morning light. Dust motes floated in the thin shafts that crept through gaps in the fabric. A fire burned low in the hearth, barely enough to warm the space. The walls were lined with toys that looked untouched: wooden swords, painted horses, a rocking chair sized for a child. Everything pristine, everything ignored. And in the center of it all, curled in a chair far too big for him, sat a small boy with dark hair and eyes the color of rain. Prince Stellin didn't look up when she entered. He was staring at something in his hands, a wooden wolf, crudely carved, its paint chipping at the edges. His fingers traced the shape of it over and over, a mindless repetition that spoke of loneliness so deep it had become routine. Ioni set down the linens quietly. "Good morning, Your Highness." No response. She moved to the curtains and pulled them open. Sunlight flooded the room, golden and warm, and Stellin flinched as if it burned. "I like the dark," he said. His voice was small and hoarse, as if he didn't use it often. "The dark is for sleeping," Ioni replied gently. "The light is for living." He looked at her then, really looked, and something strange passed between them. A flicker, like recognition, though they'd never met. "You're new," Stellin said. "I am." "The others leave." He returned his attention to the wooden wolf. "Everyone leaves." The matter-of-fact way he said it made Ioni's chest ache. 5 years old, and he'd already learned that people gave up on him. That hope was something other people were allowed to have. She knelt beside his chair, bringing herself to his eye level. Up close, she could see the shadows beneath his eyes, the pallor of his skin. He smelled wrong somehow. Not sick exactly, but muted, as if something vital had been dampened inside him. "I'm not going anywhere, Your Highness." "That's what they all say." "Then I'll prove them wrong." Something shifted in his expression. Not hope. He was too wounded to trust hope, but curiosity. A tiny crack in the wall he'd built around himself. Ioni spent the morning cleaning his chambers while Stellin watched from his chair. He didn't speak again, but he didn't turn away either. His gray eyes followed her as she worked, studying her with the wariness of a wild animal deciding whether to trust. When she brought his breakfast, he ate a few bites, then a few more. More than usual, the kitchen maid told her later. The prince barely touched his food most days. Small victories, Ioni thought. Small steps. It was afternoon when Ioni noticed it. She was changing his bedsheets when Stellin suddenly clutched his chest, his face contorting in pain. He didn't cry out, just pressed his lips together and squeezed his eyes shut, enduring whatever was happening in silence, as if he'd learned long ago that no one would come if he screamed. Ioni dropped the sheets and rushed to him. "Your Highness? What's wrong?" He shook his head, unable to speak. His small body trembled, sweat beading on his forehead. She placed her hand on his back without thinking, trying to comfort him, and that's when she felt it. A pulse, deep beneath his skin, buried so far down it was almost imperceptible. But it was there, faint, struggling, alive. Ioni froze. She knew that sensation. She'd felt it before, long ago, in a life she'd tried to forget. A wolf that had been caged, suppressed, locked away where no one could find it. The healers thought the prince had no wolf. They were wrong. His wolf wasn't missing. It was trapped. Stellin's pain passed. He slumped in his chair, exhausted, his small body still trembling with aftershocks. It happens sometimes, he whispered. The hurting. Father says the healers are trying to help. The medicine they give you, Ioni said carefully, keeping her voice steady despite her racing thoughts. Does it make the hurting better or worse? Stellin blinked at her. No one had ever asked him that before. Worse, he admitted quietly. But Father says I have to take it. He says it will bring my wolf. Ion's blood ran cold. The medicine wasn't helping him. It was the very thing keeping his wolf imprisoned. That night, Ioni couldn't sleep. She lay in her narrow cot in the servants' quarters, staring at the cracked ceiling, her thoughts spiraling like leaves caught in a storm. The wolf was there, buried deep, suffocated, but alive. And every dose of medicine pushed it further down. But who would believe her? She was an Omega Maid with no credentials, no standing, and no right to question royal healers. If she spoke up, she'd be dismissed at best, punished at worst. The laws of Valdemir were clear about servants who overstepped their place. And then there was the other problem. The one she'd spent years running from. If she revealed what she could sense, they would ask how she knew. They would dig into her past. They would discover that Ioni wasn't just an Omega with sharp instincts. She was a healer. Or she had been, before everything fell apart. Born to a disgraced bloodline of wolf speakers, Ioni had inherited abilities most shifters didn't believe existed anymore. She could feel the bond between a shifter and their beast, could sense when it was healthy, when it was damaged, when it was being tampered with. Her mother had possessed the same gift. It had gotten her killed. Ioni closed her eyes, and the memories came flooding back. The night the mob had come, torches flickering in the darkness, voices raised in hatred and fear. Her mother's face, calm even as they dragged her from their small cottage, even as they bound her hands and called her a witch. Hide, her mother had whispered. Hide and don't come out until they're gone. Ioni had been 16. She'd crouched in the root cellar for 3 days, listening to the search parties above, barely daring to breathe. By the time she emerged, her mother was dead. Executed in the town square for crimes she'd never committed. She'd been running ever since, burying her abilities, pretending to be nothing and no one, changing her name, her story, her entire identity every time she moved to a new territory. 6 years of running, 6 years of hiding, 6 years of being alone. And now she'd felt something she couldn't unfeel. A child was being poisoned, slowly, methodically, by the very people who claimed to be healing him. And if she did nothing, that child would lose his wolf forever. Or worse, a dark voice whispered. What if losing the wolf isn't the goal? What if they want him dead? Ioni sat up in bed, her pulse racing. She thought of Stellin's face, his quiet resignation, the way he'd said, "Everyone leaves," like it was simply a fact of his existence. She thought of her mother's voice, the last words she'd spoken before they took her away. Our gift is not for hiding, little one. It's for protecting those who cannot protect themselves. Ioni pressed her hands to her face and breathed. By dawn, she had made her decision. She would not go to the healers. She would not go to the household staff. If someone in the castle was deliberately suppressing the prince's wolf, they would have allies. People who would silence her before she could prove anything. She needed to go directly to the king. She was almost to the tower bridge when she heard voices. Low, urgent, coming from an alcove to her left. Ioni pressed herself against the cold stone wall, her heart hammering. Can't keep this up forever. The boy is weakening. She recognized that voice. Healer Fenick. He only needs to weaken enough. A second voice, male, cold, with a foreign accent that didn't belong in Valdemir. Once the king accepts his heir as Wolfless, the succession will be contested. And when it is, I know the plan. Fenick sounded irritated. But the king is stubborn. He keeps hoping. Then give him reason to stop. Silence. Ioni held her breath, pressing harder against the stone. There's a new maid, Fenick said finally, assigned to the prince's quarters. She's different. The boy responds to her. If she starts asking questions, then make sure she doesn't. Footsteps, coming her way. Ione ran. She burst through the servants' entrance and didn't stop until she reached the kitchens, where she collapsed against a flour barrel, gasping for air. Fenick wasn't trying to help the prince, he was trying to destroy him. And now he knew someone was watching. Ione knew she was out of time. Every moment that passed was a moment Fenick could use to identify her, to silence her, to ensure she never spoke to anyone about what she'd heard. She needed to reach the king before the healer reached her. But how did an Omega Maid request an audience with the Alpha King? She couldn't go through proper channels. The steward would laugh her out of his office. The guards would never let her near the royal chambers. And if Fenick had allies among the staff, which he almost certainly did, any formal request would be intercepted. She needed another way. The answer came as she climbed back to the prince's tower. The king visited his son. Not often, not for long, but he came. Usually in the evenings after the court had dispersed. If she could simply be there when he arrived, it was reckless, desperate. It was also her only option. She spent the day with Stellin, watching him closely. The tremor in his hands when he tried to hold his wooden wolf. The dark circles under his eyes that spoke of pain rather than rest. The way he flinched at sudden sounds, as if expecting a blow that never came. When evening fell, Ione didn't leave. She busied herself with unnecessary tasks, refolding linens, adjusting curtains. The sun had fully set when she heard footsteps on the bridge. Heavy, deliberate. The footsteps of a man who carried the weight of a kingdom. King Corvin stepped inside. He was taller than she'd realized, broader. His presence filled the room like a physical force, alpha dominance radiating in waves that made her Omega instincts want to bow and bare her throat. His eyes swept the chamber and landed on her with the sharpness of a blade. "You're the new maid." It wasn't a question. "Yes, Your Majesty." "Father!" Stellin scrambled from his chair and ran to Corvin, wrapping his small arms around his father's leg. The king's expression transformed instantly, the cold mask cracking to reveal something raw and desperate beneath. He knelt and pulled his son into his arms, holding him close. "How are you feeling today?" "Better." Stellin pulled back to look at his father's face. "Ione stayed with me. She didn't leave." Corvin's eyes flickered to her again, this time with something other than dismissal. Curiosity, perhaps, or surprise. After Stellin had gone to bed, Corvin turned to her. "My son called you his friend. He's never had a friend before. Everyone around him has always wanted something, to curry favor with me, to position themselves for power. But you genuinely care about him." "I do." His voice caught. "I almost lost him. Would have, if you hadn't—" He stopped. "The healers are wrong," Ione said before she could stop herself. The king went very still. "What did you say?" "No taking it back now. Your son has a wolf, Your Majesty. I've felt it. It's not missing. It's being suppressed. The medicine Fenick gives him isn't awakening his wolf. It's caging it." Corvin's eyes flashed gold, his wolf surging to the surface. How would an Omega Maid know something 12 royal healers missed? Ione's throat tightened. "Because I'm not just a maid, I'm a wolf speaker. And someone in your castle is trying to destroy your son." The silence was absolute. Corvin stared at her as if she'd grown a second head. A wolf speaker. The words hung between them, dangerous, impossible, and forbidden. "Wolf speakers are extinct," he said flatly. "The last bloodlines were wiped out decades ago. Most of them were, not all. You're telling me you can sense the bond between a shifter and their wolf? Yes. And my son has a wolf that someone deliberately imprisoned. Yes, Your Majesty. He turned away from her, walked to the window and stood there, his back rigid, his silhouette dark against the moonlit glass. When he spoke again, his voice was hoarse. Do you know what I would give to believe you? To believe my son isn't broken? That there's still hope? Then believe me, I can't. He spun around, and Ioni saw the anguish carved into his features. I can't afford to believe in miracles that don't exist. I buried my wife believing the healers could save her. They couldn't. And now I'm watching my son fade while those same healers tell me there's nothing to be done. Fenick isn't trying to save him. Ioni stepped forward, urgency overcoming her fear. I overheard him this morning speaking with someone, a man with a foreign accent. They talked about weakening the prince so the succession could be contested. Corvin's expression shifted. The grief hardened into something sharper, more dangerous. You're accusing my chief healer of treason. I'm telling you what I heard. Prove it, he said. You say you can sense the bond. Prove it. Right now. He extended his hand toward her. An invitation. A challenge. Ioni understood what he was asking. To feel someone's wolf was to see into their soul. It was intimate in ways that had no words. She reached out and placed her palm against his. The sensation hit her like a wave crashing against rocks. His wolf was massive, ancient and powerful, a creature of ice and fury barely contained beneath his skin. She could feel its strength, its dominance, the raw alpha power that made lesser wolves cower and submit. But beneath the strength, she felt something else. Cracks, fractures, places where grief had torn through the bond and left scars that hadn't healed. She felt his love for his son, desperate, all-consuming and terrifying in its intensity. The kind of love that would burn kingdoms to ash if it meant keeping one small boy safe. She felt his love for his dead wife, a wound that still bled, that would always bleed. 5 years, and he still reached for her in his sleep. Still turned to share something with her before remembering she was gone. And she felt his loneliness, the crushing, unbearable weight of being a king who couldn't show weakness, a father who couldn't save his child, a man who had forgotten what it felt like to be touched without agenda. Tears slipped down Ioni's cheeks before she could stop them. Your Majesty, she breathed, your wolf is beautiful, but it's so sad. It's been mourning for 5 years and it doesn't know how to stop. Corvin jerked his hand back as if she'd burned him. He stared at her with wide eyes, his chest heaving. For a long moment, he didn't speak. Couldn't speak. How did you... He stopped, swallowed hard. No one knows that. I've never told anyone. I didn't need you to tell me. Ioni wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. That's what wolf speakers do. We feel what words can't say. The king stood frozen, processing something he'd believed was impossible. Then, slowly, his expression changed. The suspicion didn't vanish entirely, but something else crept in alongside it. Something that looked almost like hope. My son, he said roughly. You felt something in my son? His wolf is young, but it's strong. Stronger than it should be after years of suppression. It's been fighting the medicine with everything it has. Ioni met his eyes. That's why he has those episodes of pain. The wolf is trying to break through, and the medicine is forcing it back down. Every time it happens, both the wolf and the prince grow weaker. Corvin's hands curled into fists. If what you're saying is true, it is true. And whoever Fenick is working with, they're getting impatient. I heard them say they need the prince to weaken faster. Then I'll have him arrested tonight. Wait. Ioni caught his arm without thinking. They both froze at the contact. The spark of connection, Alpha and Omega, king and servant, crackled between them. She released him quickly. Forgive me, Your Majesty. But if you arrest Fenick now, his accomplice will disappear. You'll never know who else is involved. How deep this goes. You want me to let the man poisoning my son walk free? I want you to let me help you catch everyone responsible. Stop the medication tomorrow. Tell Fenick you want to try a different approach. Watch who panics. Watch who reaches out to their allies. She held his gaze. And let me work with the prince. Let me try to coax his wolf back to the surface. You can do that? I can try. The war played out behind his eyes. Trust versus suspicion, hope versus fear. What's your name? Ioni, Your Majesty. Ioni. He said it slowly, as if testing how it felt. If you're deceiving me, I will have you executed. Do you understand? I understand. A long pause. Then something in his posture shifted. Not softer exactly, but less guarded. You'll move to chambers adjacent to my son's. You'll report directly to me, no one else. Relief flooded through her. Thank you, Your Majesty. He turned to leave, then stopped at the door. Ioni, don't make me regret this. 3 weeks changed everything. Without the medicine, Prince Stellin began to transform. Color returned to his cheeks. His appetite increased. He laughed, actually laughed, for the first time anyone could remember. The servants whispered about miracles, about answered prayers. Ioni knew it wasn't a miracle. It was simply what happened when you stopped poisoning a child. She worked with him every day, using techniques her mother had taught her long ago. She placed her hands on his chest and spoke to the wolf trapped inside, coaxing it forward with gentle words and steady patience. She couldn't force the bond to heal, but she could encourage it, nurture it, give it permission to exist. I felt something today, Stellin told her one morning, his eyes wide with wonder. Like a growl, but inside me. Ioni's heart soared. That's your wolf, sweetheart. It's waking up. The king visited every evening now. He claimed it was to check on his son's progress, but Ioni noticed how his gaze lingered on her when he thought she wasn't looking, how he found reasons to stay longer than necessary, how he asked her questions that had nothing to do with Stellin's treatment. Where did you grow up? A small village in the eastern mountains, Your Majesty. It's gone now. And your family? Gone as well. She kept her voice steady. I've been alone for a long time. Corvin didn't press, but she saw the way his expression softened, the way his eyes filled with understanding rather than pity. She was growing attached to the boy who called her his friend, to this castle that had become something like home, to the king who watched her with eyes that were no longer cold. This was dangerous. She knew it was dangerous, but she couldn't seem to stop. They fell into a routine. Evenings spent in Stellin's chambers, the three of them together. Corvin would read to his son while Ioni worked on her mending. Sometimes their eyes would meet over Stellin's head, and something would pass between them, a shared smile, a moment of connection that felt more intimate than any touch. On the 18th night, Corvin arrived earlier than usual. Stellin had already fallen asleep, exhausted from a day of running through the gardens for the first time in months. He's doing well, Corvin said quietly, gazing at his son's peaceful face. He is. His wolf grows stronger every day. Because of you. He turned to face her fully. Everything that's gotten better, it's because of you. I only showed him what was already there. You saved him. Corvin moved closer, close enough that she could smell the pine and winter air that clung to his skin. And I don't know how to thank you for that. You don't need to thank me. Yes, I do. His hand rose, hesitated, and then gently brushed a strand of hair from her face. You're the first person in 5 years who's made me feel like I might survive this. The words hung between them, raw and honest and impossible. Ioni knew she should step back, should remind him of her station, of the chasm between their worlds. But his hand was warm against her cheek, and his eyes held a vulnerability he showed to no one else. A sharp knock shattered the moment. "Your Majesty! Urgent news!" Corvin's expression hardened back into the mask of a king. "Enter." A guard stepped inside, face pale. Healer Fenick has fled the castle. He has taken the prince's medical records, including records of wolf speaker techniques being used in treatment. Ioni's blood ran cold. "There's more, sire." The guard glanced at her nervously. "He left a message. He said the Omega Maid is a witch from the Valdessa bloodline, that her kind were exterminated for good reason, and if you don't hand her over within 3 days, he'll expose you to every kingdom." Valdessa? Her mother's name. A curse. A death sentence. Corvin turned to her. His expression was unreadable. "Is it true? Are you from the Valdessa bloodline?" "Yes." The bloodline accused of poisoning 3 packs, of driving wolves mad with their magic. Accused. Never convicted. Her voice trembled despite her efforts to steady it. "My mother died for crimes she didn't commit. My family was slaughtered because people feared what they couldn't understand." The room was silent except for the crackle of the fire. Corvin dismissed the guard with a wave. Then he crossed to her slowly, deliberately. "Fenick wants me to hand you over," he said quietly, "to let the High Council try you as a criminal. I know. He's counting on my fear, on my desire to protect my throne, my kingdom, my reputation." His thumbs brushed away the tears sliding down her cheeks. "He doesn't know me very well." Ioni stared at him, hardly daring to breathe. "3 weeks ago, my son was dying. No one could help except you." His voice was fierce now, his wolf burning behind his eyes. "I don't care what bloodline you come from. I care about what I've seen with my own eyes. The High Council can go to hell." He gripped her hands tightly. "I will not hand you over. Not now. Not ever. Do you understand? Fenick won't stop. He has allies. If he exposes what I am, then we expose him first." A sharp, predatory smile crossed his face. Fenick ran, which means he's scared. And scared men make mistakes. We find him, and we end this. Behind them, a small voice spoke from the bed. "Father?" They both turned. Stellin was sitting up, his eyes wide and glowing gold. "Father." The boy's voice trembled with wonder and fear. "Something's happening. I feel—" He doubled over with a cry of pain. Ioni rushed to him, Corvin right behind her. She placed her hands on Stellin's chest and reached for his wolf. It surged up to meet her, massive, powerful. Finally free. "It's happening," she breathed. "He's shifting." Corvin gripped her shoulder, his voice raw with emotion. "Is he going to be all right?" "Yes." Ioni smiled through her tears as she felt the wolf break through the last of its chains. "He's going to be perfect." And as the prince's first howl echoed through the tower, golden and triumphant and alive, Ioni knew that whatever came next, Fenick's threats, the High Council's judgment, the impossible future she and Corvin couldn't have, this moment made everything worth it. The wolf was free. And so, finally, was she. Stellin's first shift lasted only minutes, but it changed everything. The small white wolf that emerged from the boy's trembling body was pure and fierce and undeniably royal. His golden eyes blazed with the power of 12 generations of Valdmir kings. When he howled, the sound carried across the castle grounds, and every wolf within hearing distance raised their voice in response. The heir had awakened. Word spread through the kingdom like wildfire. By morning, crowds had gathered outside the castle gates, cheering, weeping, and celebrating the miracle they'd been told was impossible. The prince had a wolf. The succession was secure. Valdmir would endure. But inside the castle, Corvin was preparing for war. Fenick crossed into Morith territory 2 days ago, the spymaster reported, spreading a map across the council table. He's seeking asylum with Lord Rathburn. Ioni stood at the edge of the council room, still uncomfortable in the fine dress Corvin had insisted she wear. She was no longer a maid. The king had made that clear. But she didn't know what she was now. An advisor? A guest? Something more? Rathburn. Corvin's voice dripped with contempt. My father's bastard brother. His eyes met Ioni's across the table. The foreign-accented man Fenick had been meeting with was Rathburn's agent. It all leads back to him. He's been contesting your rule since your coronation, the spymaster continued. With a wolfless heir, he could have petitioned the High Council to transfer succession to his line, now that the prince has shifted. He's desperate. Corvin straightened, his expression cold and calculating. Desperate men are sloppy. What resources does he have? A small private army, perhaps 300 men, and Fenick's testimony about the wolf speaker. Corvin's fist slammed against the table. I want messengers sent to every allied kingdom. I want them to know that healer Fenick poisoned my son for 5 years on Rathburn's orders. I want them to know that a wolf speaker saved the prince when our own healers couldn't. And I want them to know that any kingdom harboring these traitors will face Valdemir's full wrath. The messengers departed within the hour. 3 days later, Morith surrendered Fenick and Rathburn without a fight. Lord Rathburn's own allies had turned on him once they learned the full extent of the conspiracy. Poisoning a child, even for political gain, was a line no honorable wolf would cross. The prisoners arrived at Valdemir in chains. Ioni watched from the tower window as they were led through the castle gates. Fenick looked shrunken somehow, smaller than she remembered. The cold confidence had been replaced by the hollow terror of a man who knew his fate was sealed. You don't have to watch this. She turned to find Corvin standing behind her, his expression gentle. Yes, I do. Ioni faced the window again. I've spent years running from men like him. Men who destroyed my family because they were afraid of what we could do. I need to see this end. Corvin moved to stand beside her. The trial concluded this morning. Fenick confessed to everything. The poisoning, the conspiracy, the plan to eliminate Stellin and install Rathburn as heir. They'll be executed at dawn. And the accusations against my bloodline? Dismissed entirely. His hand found hers, their fingers intertwining. I had scholars review the original trial records from your mother's case. She was condemned on the testimony of a single witness, a witness who was later discovered to be in the employ of a rival pack leader who wanted your family's lands. His grip tightened. There was never any evidence of wrongdoing, just fear and greed and politics. Ioni's throat constricted with emotion. Years of running, years of hiding, and it had all been built on lies. I'm going to issue a formal pardon, Corvin continued, for your entire bloodline, a public acknowledgement that the Valdesa family was wrongly persecuted. He turned to face her fully. Your mother's name will be cleared, Ioni, I swear it. A sob escaped her before she could stop it. Why? She managed. Why are you doing all this? Corvin cupped her face in his hands, tilting it up so she had no choice but to meet his eyes. Because you saved my son. His thumb traced the curve of her cheek. Because you showed me what courage looks like. Because every moment I spend with you, I feel something I thought died with my wife. His voice dropped to a whisper. Because I love you, Ioni, and I'm tired of pretending I don't. Ioni's heart stuttered. You can't, she breathed. I'm an Omega, a servant. The kingdom would never. The kingdom will accept what I tell them to accept. He leaned closer, his forehead resting against hers. I'm not asking you to be my mistress, Ioni. I'm not asking you to hide in shadows. I'm asking you to be my queen, my mate, the mother of any children we might have together. Corvin, say yes. His voice cracked with vulnerability. Please, I've been alone for so long. I've been so cold. And you make me feel warm again. You make me feel alive. Ioni thought of everything she'd survived. The mob that killed her mother. The years of hiding. The loneliness that had become so familiar she'd forgotten what connection felt like. And she thought of Stellin, who called her his friend, of Corvin, who looked at her like she was something precious, of the future stretching before her, no longer empty and terrifying, but full of possibility. Yes, she whispered. Corvin kissed her. It was gentle at first, tentative, as if he was afraid she might disappear. But when she melted into him, her hands gripping his shoulders, something shifted. The kiss deepened. His arms wrapped around her, pulling her close. The mate bond snapped into place like a key turning in a lock. Ioni gasped against his mouth. She felt him, felt everything. His love, his fear, his desperate hope, his fierce protectiveness. And she knew he felt her too. Every scar, every wound, every guarded piece of her heart now laid bare before him. Mine, Corvin growled against her lips. My mate, my queen, mine. Yours, Ioni breathed back. Always. 1 year later. The royal gardens were in full bloom when Stellin shifted for the 100th time. Ioni watched from the terrace as the young prince raced through the flowers, his white wolf form a blur of joy and energy. He was bigger now, stronger, his wolf growing alongside him as nature had always intended. The healers at the new academy, the one Corvin had established to train wolf speakers instead of persecute them, said he would be one of the most powerful alphas of his generation. He's getting faster. Ione smiled as Corvin's arms wrapped around her from behind, his hands settling over the swell of her belly. He's been practicing, she said. He wants to be able to keep up with his sister when she's old enough to shift. Sister. Corvin pressed a kiss to her temple. You're still certain it's a girl? I can feel her wolf already. Ione leaned back into his warmth. She's going to be fierce, just like her father. And stubborn, like her mother. Ione laughed, turning in his arms to face him. Even after a year of marriage, the sight of him still made her breath catch. He smiled more now. The shadows that had haunted his eyes were gone, replaced by something bright and hopeful. The delegation from Morith arrives tomorrow, he said. They want to discuss opening an academy branch in their territory. Good. Wolf speakers shouldn't have to hide anymore. No one should have to hide what they are. Corvin's expression softened. No, they shouldn't. He kissed her, slow and deep, the mate bond humming between them like a song that never ended. When they finally pulled apart, Stellin was bounding toward them, his wolf tongue lolling in a grin. Mother. Father. Did you see how fast I was? Mother. The word still made Ione's heart ache with joy. She'd been terrified when Stellin first called her that. Terrified of overstepping, of replacing the woman who'd died bringing him into the world. But Corvin had held her hand and told her that Lyrian would have loved her, would have been grateful that her son had someone who cherished him so completely. You were magnificent, Ioni told him, kneeling to ruffle the fur between his ears. But now it's time for your lessons. Stellin groaned, a surprisingly human sound from a wolf's throat, but obediently shifted back to his human form. A servant appeared with a robe, and the prince wrapped himself in it with practiced ease. Can we practice again tomorrow? He asked hopefully. I want to race you, father. Tomorrow, Corvin agreed, ruffling his son's dark hair. Now go. Your tutor is waiting. Stellin bounded off toward the castle, all energy and enthusiasm, so different from the hollow-eyed boy Ioni had met a year ago. She watched him go, her hand drifting once more to her belly. What are you thinking? Corvin asked quietly. I'm thinking about how much has changed. A year ago, I was scrubbing floors and praying no one would discover what I was. Now I'm Queen of Valdmir, carrying the king's child, watching the prince I helped save run through gardens that feel like home. And? He tilted her chin up, searching her eyes. Is it everything you hoped? She thought about her mother, who would never see this moment but whose name had been cleared at last. She thought about the academy, where young wolf speakers trained openly, their gifts celebrated instead of feared. She thought about Stellin's laugh and Corvin's smile, and the daughter growing inside her, already strong, already loved. "It's more," she said softly. "It's so much more." Corvin pulled her close and Ioni breathed him in, pine and winter air and home. She had spent so long believing she didn't deserve happiness, that her bloodline was a curse, that her gifts were something to be ashamed of, that love was something other people got to have. She'd been wrong. And standing here, in the arms of her mate, with their family growing and their kingdom thriving and their future stretching bright and endless before them, Ioni finally understood what her mother had tried to tell her all those years ago. Their gift was not for hiding, it was for protecting those who could not protect themselves, and she would spend the rest of her life doing exactly that. The wolf should have come by now. Every healer in Valdemir had said the same thing. 5 years old, and Prince Stellin had shown no sign of the beast that lived in every royal bloodline for 12 generations. The kingdom whispered what no one dared say aloud. A wolfless heir was no heir at all. But then she arrived. An Omega Maid who wasn't supposed to speak, wasn't supposed to notice, wasn't supposed to see what 12 royal healers had missed. But she did. And nothing in Valdemir would ever be the same. Thank you for listening to this story. If you enjoyed it, please leave a comment below and let me know what you thought. Your feedback means more than you know.